dangerous prehistoric world comes to life again as we revisit the work of one of Hollywood's finest special effects artists, Willis H. O'Brien, as seen in the spectacular 1925 production of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's imaginative story, The Lost World. London's Zoological Hall in the year 1912 provides the setting for the beginning of the exciting adventure to come in The Lost World. Professor George Edward Challenger, portrayed by a bearded Wallace Beery, tells his audience of a huge plateau in South America where ancient reptiles and birds can be found. Enraged at their disbelief, he dares anyone in the hall to accompany him on a trip to prove that what he says is true. The first to volunteer is Professor Summerlee, played by Arthur Hoyt. Although he doubts Challenger's story, he is accepted. Lewis Stone, as Sir John Roxton, a famous big game hunter, asks to go along. Reporter Ed Malone, played by Lloyd Hughes, requests permission to accompany the expedition. Challenger reacts violently to his brash request, but eventually consents to let him go along. After several months of preparation, the expedition makes its way up the treacherous Amazon River. On all sides, life in all its strange and dangerous forms, including a deadly python, threatens the completion of the journey. The young girl on the trip is Paula White, whose father was lost on a previous trip to the prehistoric site. She is played by the lovely Bessie Love, who was still acting in British films during the 1960s. Pressing onward into the dense jungle, the explorers at last reach the base of the Great Plateau. In the hours before dawn, with the last ape man in existence looking on, they set up their equipment and map their plans to scale the heights of the cliff. The explorers have found a tree which they can use to cross over the Great Chasm. However, the ape man, played by Bull Montana, has other plans. He drops a big boulder on the explorers, barely missing them. Now they are convinced that there is indeed life on the plateau. Not only human life manifests itself, but animal life as well. A great flying pteranodon with a wingspread of over 28 feet is just settling down with its lunch, a helpless lizard. By dawn, part of the group has scaled the peak, while others in the party remain below. Slowly, the intrepid explorers make their way across the yawning chasm on their temporary bridge as a huge brontosaurus forages for his breakfast. The huge brontosaurus suddenly appears, causing the terrified explorers to hide to avoid detection. To show the actors and the miniature animal in the same shot, the screen was split and each section taken separately. In order to make the animal move, Willis H. O'Brien shot each sequence one frame at a time. After each shot, the animal is moved slightly and another frame is taken. This process goes on until all the movements for a sequence have been completed. It might take an entire day to shoot a 1-minute sequence by this laborious single-frame method, but the results on the screen were well worth it. This remarkably animated animal has blocked the explorers' only means of escape, leaving them trapped the same way Paula's father was trapped here on a previous trip. The Tracheodon is looking for his breakfast, and so is the allosaur. Only Willis H. O'Brien could have caught the sinuous weaving and bobbing of these reptiles with such naturalness. The intricacies of the movements in this fight scene are a tribute to his talent. The cinematographer on the production was Arthur Edison, who photographed the Douglas Fairbanks spectacles and John Huston's classic film, The Maltese Falcon, in 1941. Out of the glade comes a baby Triceratops and his mother. Sensing danger, the mother pushes her child to safety. A scene reminiscent of one in Walt Disney's Bambi, except that this time the hunter is not a man with a rifle, but a hungry allosaur. The mother's horns stab the allosaur in the stomach, and this saves her child. the allosaur turns his mind to the explorers and crashes through their enclosure. The wedding of these miniature animals with actual actors on the screen is again shown by means of the split-screen photographic technique. As we view the lost world today, we regret that the imperfect picture we see is only a shadow of the original production, since the negative has long ago disappeared and no known complete prints are in existence. Just what happened to the original negative is one of Hollywood's well-kept secrets. The allosaur encounters a spiked lizard, and one of the spikes catches the allosaur in the stomach, and his search for breakfast is over. The ape man attacks the enclosure, but a bullet in his arm causes him to retreat. A Tyrannosaurus appears and pushes the allosaur to the ground in another amazing fight scene done with the miniature animals designed by O'Brien. Not only were the animals only a few feet long, but the settings were also meticulously designed to scale. Many of them had a three-dimensional quality which were quite remarkable for 1925. Fleeing from the dangers on the plateau, the explorers retreat to a cave where Paula continues to wonder if her father might still be alive. Sir John discovers the remains of the father in the cave. As he moves further into the cave, Sir John discovers it goes all the way through to the other side. He attempts to attract the attention of those in the party who are still on the ground. Paula White and Ed Malone find themselves in love, and Professor Summerlee, who happens to be a clergyman, will marry them. This was a concession to the code of morality which pervaded the films of the 1920s under the constricting production code of the Hays office. Sir John, who always was interested in Paula himself, shows his disappointment. Louis Stone continued a 30-year film career which was to span both silent and sound films, culminating in his most famous role of Judge Hardy in the Hardy Family series of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. He was active in films until his death in 1953. In another scene, the professor is watching a brontosaurus feed. The model animals were made out of latex rubber, surrounding a ball and socket wire articulated skeleton, enabling the models to be moved properly to simulate motion. O'Brien put small pins in the eyes of the animals to make them seem to move. Saliva was simulated by wet shellac. The Allosaurus approaches the Brontosaurus. These mortal enemies must now fight to the death. His powerful tail is useless as it hangs over the side of the cliff. He grabs a jugular vein and holds on, but loses his footing and falls over. Willis H. O'Brien could put a great deal of personality into his animal models and often gave them human emotions and reactions. Despite the long fall, the Brontosaurus is still alive because of the mud which cushioned his fall. As in many other films of its type before and since, the impending danger of an active volcano added suspense to an adventure film. And now the nearby crater prepares to erupt. In the original release of The Lost World, this sequence was tinted in red to add to its realism. Paula and Sir John wait for the explorers to return as a herd of Triceratops rush by. The animation of a large group of models was even more complex than creating movements for just one or two figures, but O'Brien managed to make a sequence like this seem natural as a stampede of real animals. In the morning, we see the tragic results of the eruption. The animals are scavenging for food, resulting in another remarkable stop-motion animated scene. The explorers now attempt their escape, while Jocko carries the rope ladder to them. Now we have the genesis of an idea which O'Brien later developed in his masterpiece King Kong in 1933. In that film, the huge gorilla pulls up a rope containing the heroine and a young sailor who was attempting to rescue her. In The Lost World, the idea is good for some thrills and suspense. As the party heads back to civilization, they come upon the living Brontosaurus. It is decided to take the beast back to London as proof of prehistoric life on the plateau. It is a decision which would have disastrous results. The Lost World is said to have been the first major film to show an attempt to bring an animal from its natural habitat to the artificial environment of a big city. Although the idea has been repeated in many films since, especially in the Japanese monster films of the 1960s, the idea excited audiences of the 1920s with its freshness. Veteran character actor Wallace Beery began in silent accent comedies and became one of the most beloved character actors in talking films until his death in 1949. Here he receives a message that the huge animal he has brought back from South America is on the loose and running wild in the streets of London. Challenger rushes through the panicked crowd in an attempt to save the animal from destruction by the terrified populace. The huge tail was built to scale for this scene and is, of course, many times larger than the entire animal used in the miniature shots. As the crowds rush for the safety of the subway, the animal knocks over a statue in this miniature London street. These are all superb miniatures, combined with superimpositions and slow-motion photography to assure realism. These shots are amazing for their time and hold up remarkably well against today's advanced film technology. The street lamp burns him slightly, spurring him into a rage. We soon find him lumbering onto a London bridge as the terrified spectators look on. His weight is too much for the bridge, and he falls through it and into the Thames, where he quickly swims out of sight, presumably to return home. Opinions vary as to whether or not the animal survives the trip back. According to the production code of the movies during this period, he would have to perish, since all crimes must be atoned for with imprisonment or death. Others insist that there is no doubt that the animal got back to South America unharmed, since animals, especially prehistoric ones, are amoral and not immoral. Love triumphs as the story reaches a quick climax. Sir John says goodbye to Paula and Ed, while Challenger cries alone on the bridge, bringing the Lost World to a close. This is Willis H. O'Brien, the genius responsible for the brilliant special effects in The Lost World, taken when he was in his 70s. He stands before a painting he did for a projected undersea monster film which was never produced. This is a painting of another production which was never realized, but O'Brien did give us the greatest monster trick film of all time, King Kong, which was made 8 years after The Lost World startled movie audiences. It was his great art and talent which brought forth the most fearsome animal character in screen history. For his work on The Lost World and King Kong, Willis H. O'Brien will always be remembered as one of the great special effects artists in motion pictures. He died in 1962 while preparing sequences for Stanley Kramer's widescreen comedy, It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. And he leaves his amazing films as a legacy for future generations to study and enjoy.